Some of Rome's most wounded veterans did not return home with honors or to a quiet life, but to a much darker and unexpected fate. They were called into a shadow game, where true power lay not in swords or shields, but in the conspiracies and intrigues that shaped the fate of the empire. You might think that after a life on the battlefield, these men would be far from political conflicts. But what if I told you that many of Rome's disabled veterans became key players in secret plots, manipulated to serve hidden interests within the imperial corridors? Get ready to uncover the truth behind these abandoned warriors, who found a new purpose in the backrooms of Roman politics. Today, you'll unravel how the empire turned its heroes into players in conspiracies that shaped the destiny of Rome. What comes next reveals a hidden side of power, where the scars of war became weapons in the hands of political strategists. Roman veterans, especially those returning from wars with permanent injuries, faced a harsh reality. Though celebrated in the heat of battle, once out of the fields, recognition quickly faded. Many returned expecting a life of glory, but found an indifferent Rome, where their scars inspired not admiration, but pity. Those who lost the ability to fight were seen as shadows of their former selves, their contributions forgotten, while new soldiers took their place in the legions. The years of service that should have guaranteed privileges often resulted in a life of hardship. Promised lands were distant, barren, and inhospitable, and the financial support offered by the state was insufficient to ensure a dignified life. Helpless veterans were forced to beg on the streets of Rome or engage in degrading work for those they once fought for in the glory of the empire. Resentment grew, along with a sense of betrayal from the homeland they had sworn to defend. However, among the shadows of bureaucracies and palaces, there were those who did not see these veterans as expendable. These men carried more than scars. They brought with them a deep knowledge of military strategies, the secrets of the battlefield, and above all, an unwavering loyalty to the empire. While society ignored them, powerful figures watched them as valuable pieces in a game far more complex than battles on foreign lands. These veterans, many of them disillusioned and with no prospects, became targets for recruitment into administrative services and secret roles. The empire, always on the lookout for those who could serve its hidden interests, saw in these men an untapped resource. Away from public scrutiny, these warriors were reintegrated into new missions, this time behind the scenes of politics, where physical strength mattered less than the ability to keep secrets and follow orders without question. Instead of resting after years of fighting, many disabled veterans found a new purpose: to become agents of imperial conspiracies. The same hands that once wielded swords in battle now handled secret documents, ensuring the continuity of plots known to only a few. In an empire that thrived on intrigues and power games, these men, once forgotten, found themselves once again at the center of a war, but this time, without the glory and honors of victory. The recruitment process of these veterans for secret activities was never something public or formal. It was a hidden, discreet practice that exploited the desperation and blind loyalty of these former soldiers. Often, the approach was made through intermediaries who promised a new life, a second chance to serve the empire, but in less obvious roles. Unbeknownst to them, these men were slowly drawn into the underworld of political power, where what was at stake was not foreign territories, but the very survival of imperial leaders. At first, the task seemed innocent: administrative roles in provinces, security for high-ranking officials, or trusted messengers in delicate negotiations. However, behind these apparent offers of professional rehabilitation lay a complex web of intrigue. Gradually, the veterans discovered that their new roles involved much more than bureaucratic tasks. They were tasked with protecting secrets, silencing enemies, and, in some cases, eliminating obstacles that threatened the stability of power. These men, who had already proven their ability to follow unquestionable orders on the battlefield, became perfect pawns in a deadly political game. Their loyalty was no longer to the army or the Roman banner, but to the individuals controlling them. Over time, many came to understand that they were trapped in a cycle of obedience and manipulation, where refusing to cooperate could mean death, not at the hands of barbarians, but by their fellow Romans. Clandestine operations required a level of secrecy that only men hardened by war could maintain. For some, these missions offered a last chance to live with purpose. For others, it simply meant an extension of their suffering, now on an invisible battlefield where morality was constantly tested. The veterans, already hardened by the brutalities of war, faced ethical dilemmas that went far beyond the simple act of killing or defending. In the end, those who survived the Empire's conspiracies did so at the cost of their souls. Many veterans, after years entangled in these political plots, became broken figures, living in the shadows of a society that no longer understood them. The heroism that had driven them in wars was now a distant memory, replaced by a constant fear of betrayals and summary executions. They learned the hard way that in Roman politics, there was no room for heroes, only for survivors. Within the luxurious palaces of Rome, where senators and emperors quietly plotted the fate of the empire, disabled veterans played a surprisingly relevant role. Away from public eyes, these men were assigned to missions of great importance but extreme discretion. They were not just bureaucrats or guards. Many acted as informants, handlers of secret documents, and even intermediaries in negotiations that needed to occur outside official corridors. What made them so valuable was precisely the invisibility that their condition provided. Wounded and worn, they were seen by many as marginal figures, making them ideal for infiltrating spaces where suspicious eyes would be focused elsewhere. They attended banquets, parties, and senatorial meetings, gathering information that could be used to protect or overthrow figures of power. More than mere witnesses, these veterans became key players in espionage networks that often determined the course of political events in Rome. Intrigues did not happen only in distant territories, but in the very corridors and chambers of power within the capital. These veterans, familiar with the art of military discipline, were able to follow orders without question. Their loyalty, once directed toward the empire as a whole, was now tied to specific individuals who held the power to ensure their livelihood or condemn them to total obscurity. Trust in their discretion made them reliable allies in dangerous conspiracies, where a word spoken at the right moment or absolute silence could mean the success or failure of a coup. As they delved deeper into the world of political plots, many veterans began to act as double agents, working for different factions within the Roman court. This practice became even more common during times of imperial successions, when emperors died or were deposed, and the throne went through a phase of transition. In these moments of uncertainty, disabled veterans were called upon to ensure that certain messages were intercepted, certain documents disappeared, and, in some cases, that certain individuals were never seen again. The environment of constant betrayal required them to engage in a mental survival game as much as a physical one. It was not uncommon for these veterans to be betrayed by those they served. Alliances were fragile, and the line between being the manipulator or the manipulated was thin. In the end, what determined their survival was the ability to read the shifts in political currents and know when to step back before the intrigues pulled them into death. Silence was the golden rule for veterans involved in the Empire's secret missions. Unlike open wars, where violence was visible and glorified, the world of imperial conspiracies required a much more careful approach. Most veterans recruited for these tasks understood from the outset that failing to complete a mission meant not only their own death, but also the death of those around them. Absolute secrecy was the only guarantee of survival, and many lived tormented by the constant need to hide truths that, if revealed, would jeopardize the fate of the empire. Secret missions varied in complexity. Some involved the simple delivery of messages that could not be intercepted by enemy spies. Others, more sinister, consisted of political assassinations, where the death of a leader or a traitor had to appear as an accident or a personal tragedy. Veterans who had already dealt with death in the field became lethal executioners when it came to silencing adversaries of power. They were specialists in killing without leaving traces, and many who dared to challenge the Roman power structure met their ends at the hands of veterans who had once fought for the glory of Rome. To ensure that the secret was kept, extreme measures were adopted. Most veterans involved in high-level operations knew they could trust no one, not even their own comrades. Often, only the highest-ranking officer and the executor knew the full details of a mission. Any failure, hesitation, or deviation from the established route was punished with summary executions. Those who attempted to escape orders faced the cruel fate reserved for traitors, a swift and inglorious death. In addition to constant surveillance, the Empire used emotional manipulation to ensure the obedience of these men. Veterans, who often had already lost their families or were alienated from society, had little to lose, but the threats of retaliation against their few remaining loved ones were an effective tactic. Fear kept them silent, and silence preserved the established order. The lives of these veterans were so entangled in the conspiracies that the simple act of speaking could trigger a chain of events with fatal consequences. Thus, deadly silence was not just an imposition, but a vital survival tool. For many veterans, secrecy became the only way to ensure their continuation in a world where a single mistake could cost them everything. They lived as shadows, executing tasks that could never be mentioned in public, and this silence accompanied them to their graves, where the marks of their actions faded along with their memories.